Hello and welcome to another Piano Pandemictivities book review. Our book today is The Art of Parlamento by Giorgio Sanguinetti. Now, if you watch this channel and know my stuff, you've already heard of Parlamento because we spend a lot of time on that. But if you don't know about it, this is the place to start. It came out a couple of years ago. I read it at the time, and I'm now coming back to it after having been very involved in Parlamento and having taught classes on it. Just to see what I missed the first time around. Giorgio Sanguinetti is a professor in Italy, and he began exploring these manuscripts that just look like bass lines, but they weren't just ordinary bass lines. It turns out they had a specific pedagogical purpose, and once he started, he and others, but he's really the first one to put it all in a book. Once he dug into the function of these, he realized, one, they're everywhere. There are thousands upon thousands of these, and it was a pillar of standard musical training, not only in Naples, Italy, Napoli, but also in Bologna and Rome. And then that whole tradition was taken to the Paris Conservatory, as I've mentioned in another review. So what happened when I first read this is there are so many things, so many assumptions about how music works and how it should be taught that are different in this book than what we all thought was the case, that one spends much of one's time going, what? This can't be. They never told me this in music school. So that's why I'm actually going back to it again now that I'm not in shock anymore. I'm sure that Professor Sanguinetti has experienced this, and other teachers of Parlamento, such as Ewald de Miera, Peter Van Tour, other friends of mine. I'm sure we've all experienced this where we have a student, possibly a virtuoso performer with an advanced degree, and they say, what is this thing, this Parlamento thing? How does it work? And we explain, and after about an hour of explanation, they always say the same thing. Why has no one ever told me this? Where has this been all my life? So that's part of the story, is why was this important way of teaching and thinking about music so successful and so widespread, and yet it kind of vanished, and now nobody knows what it is. You know, I was at what was that called? It's a very, very serious gathering of music scholars. This is very serious. The Historic Performance Institute, I think is what it was called, at Indiana University, very important music school. And not a single person there had ever heard of Parlamento. At the Historic Performance Institute, they'd never heard of it. So that's the state of affairs. Okay, so what does Sanguinetti do? First of all, he just tells the story of, what are these strange bass lines? Oh, it turns out they were a foundational part of teaching. All right, how do they work? And then he goes through, in a wonderfully methodical way, how Parlamenti are actually to be used. How do you learn from them? What are you supposed to do with them? What do we know about their teaching from back then? What do we not know? And then, while it is not a method book, it's not really a book with assignments where he says, do exactly these things. He provides enough of that a highly motivated reader could actually go through and start learning Parlamento. The most important thing to me, the reason I read it and said, aha, I can run with this, is because encoded in the Parlamenti are what are called bass motions, movimenti, sometimes called moves of the Parlamento. Anyway, they're the way the bass moves, up by this interval, down by this interval, chromatic leaps, steps, whatever. And that those all had tremendous significance to musicians back then. They were not just telling you the next bass note to stab with your left hand. They were indicating something important about the music. And it turns out that this classical music that we have been playing and loving and devoting ourselves to all these years has a code. And the code is the way the bass moves tells you what the rest of the harmony is going to be. Sometimes even very specific things about how the counterpoint is going to work. And so once you understand movimenti, you actually understand the source code of Baroque music, essentially, and galant music. And well into the Mozart style and even Beethoven style, if you like. So my thinking was, yes, I want to learn Parlamento, I want to teach Parlamento, but where I really want to go with this is, if I learn all these bass motions and absorb them in my ear, in my hand, and in every key, and with all kinds of different keyboard figurations, now I think I could create music in real time. Sort of like if you know the wonderful claymation movies of Nick Park with Wallace and Gromit, the little dog and his fussy English tea-drinking, cheese-devouring owner. And there's one where the dog ends up on a train, a toy train, and the train is running out of track, and he's sitting on the engine with a box of track sections, and he's putting them down and attaching them directly in front of the engine as he goes, and he's making his own train track. And he's doing it in real time, and he's navigating around the house. And I thought, if you knew Parlamento well enough, you could actually lay down your own tracks, which interestingly look a lot like music scores, and make a pathway through the wilderness without needing anything composed in advance for you. So that's what I saw immediately as the potential from Parlamento, and I do still feel that it is the most effective way to teach historic improvisation. I understand that Giorgio is working on some other projects now, and then he's going to come back and do an updated version of this. I'm very excited about that. We have occasionally thrown around among our Facebook group suggestions of a Parlamento conference, and I really hope that takes place. So much more in the future to make this material more widely available to people. So who could read this book? I think it will be, I'm sure it will be interesting to musicologists who just want to know about these sources and this history. To me, as a performer, I was extremely interested in it because I knew it was going to change the possibilities of what I could do on the stage. And so I think anyone who is interested in how musicians thought back then and how they took that knowledge into performance situations will find this book extremely interesting. Yes, it's very detailed about manuscripts and many, many, many names you've never heard of. That's all important as a book of musicology, but you will walk away with the materials, the basic materials of how this entire tradition worked. And on that foundation, you can build ability to improvise, which was my interest in it. So, super important book in our field, indispensable book. Bravo, Giorgio, it's beautiful. Thank you so much for your wonderful work. And I highly recommend, during the pandemic, if you have not read Art of Parlamento, what are you even doing? Come on!